Hey, welcome back. This is gonna be like lesson number like 30, I think, or at least. I don't know. And a social distancing tip I thought was really in order since I haven't done that yet. You can brush your teeth, and you should be brushing your teeth if you haven't done that yet. All right, good. Again, this website has all the videos on it and the remote learning thing here. Um, and if you get confused, get lost, if you're missing stuff, don't be afraid to email me either. And like I said, I'm keeping um, like 30 minutes a week at least that I'm um, live as I can be. All right, so we're in Article 2, and today we're really going to be focusing on like the job of the president, how he gets it done. Really, two things, and yeah, that's it. And it shouldn't be too tough. The last one was kind of fun. I think it was, where's my little pointer thing there? Um, I think it's fun to kind of know about Air Force One and the inside of the White House and stuff. Kind of cool. But that's the building. Let's talk more about like the president. And I said this in a few classes that George W. Bush used to get kind of laughed at for saying that he was the decider, because that's not really a word, but I think that's like the best description of what the president's job is. That is a decider because they're surrounded by more people than you could possibly imagine. It's probably the toughest job in the world because you have so many people relying on you. We're not only in this country, which isn't the biggest country in the world, but we are the beacon on the hill for the world to see of democracy, and the world looks to us. And it's a tough job, and there's so much to it, and you can't do it alone. And I think the best description of what a president does, and kudos to George W. Bush, is the decider in chief. They make the decisions, and they pay the consequences for it. You know. So I have it here, like the president is the CEO, chief executive officer. That's what CEO stands for. Um, they really are a big corporation, the biggest corporation probably in the world. Excuse me. And they get a lot of help, and it starts with the vice president. If you look at, like, let me start with the past vice presidents. I wasn't going to start this, but it the original idea of the vice president was to run the Senate, and that didn't work out well because my little buddy there. I can't use my pointer now. I can blow it up a little bit, and then it kind of became like a dusty old shelf to be the vice president. Some vice presidents ended up becoming president because the president died, or you know they made a name for themselves, but it was kind of a dead end job. It really didn't. You didn't really have too much to do. And it wasn't until like the modern era, in kind of my lifetime, that vice presidents were picked more for political reasons. They strengthened the weakness that the president had. They tended to be from a part of the country that the president maybe needed to win. And not only that, they started giving the vice presidents like real jobs and becoming chief advisors. That really didn't happen until probably Al Gore was probably the first one that really started doing that. But a good example of balancing the ticket kind of thing, when George H.W. Bush was running, he was an older guy, so he picked a younger Republican um, as vice president. Ronald Reagan was a governor, and George H.W. Bush was a experienced politician in Washington D.C., and he brought that. When Bill Clinton was running, he picked Al Gore. That was an odd pick, but they were both Southerners, and they were really trying to win the South, I think. And but then he gave Al Gore a lot of jobs, and Al Gore became a partner in the White House. Dick Cheney the same way, with George W. Bush. George W. Bush was young; he was the governor of Texas, and Dick Cheney had served in cabinets and he had served in Congress, and he was really experienced in Washington D.C. and he had jobs to do. Joe Biden, same thing. It was you have Barack Obama, a young senator, only been in the Senate for a few years when he got elected president. He picks a guy who'd been around in the Senate for a long, long time. Mike Pence, he, Donald Trump wasn't even really in politics, and Mike Pence was not only did he serve in Congress, but he was also a governor of Indiana. So they kind of balanced the ticket. Um, yeah, let's get rid of that. Here's Vice President Mike Pence. Speaking of which, this is his website on the White House website. And like I said, he comes with a lot of experience, and he's got jobs to do. He's the head of the COVID-19 task force, right? That's what they do now. They didn't do that before. They didn't give them jobs like that, and you wouldn't see a vice president doing stuff like that. It's kind of neat they do. One thing that's cool is where they live. Starting in like the 70s, they gave the vice president a place to live in Washington, D.C., and it's on the Navy base. This is like a quick little video. I hope it's probably gonna have a commercial or something.
My name is Jordan DeSico.
Yep. We didn't open it first. This is what happens. Just like
the Bidens took Mike Pence and his wife Karen on a tour of their new home.
I hope they enjoy it as much as Joe and I have.
Joe and Joe Biden have lived in the 33-room Queen Anne-style home for 8 years, located on the grounds of the Naval Observatory. The observatory's longtime public affairs officer, Jeff Chester, showed me one of the telescopes that the last 3 vice presidents used to get a glimpse of the final frontier.
They have been duly impressed.
He's looking forward to showing the Pences some views that are truly out of this world. There's also a second telescope that scientists used to first spot the 2 moons of Mars back in 1877. Chester is quick to point out that his great-grandfather was superintendent of the observatory and lived in the house.
So whenever the vice president comes up, I always ask him if he still likes living in my great-grandpa's house.
Vice presidents have lived here since 1974, when Congress made it their official residence.
It's not a fancy house, but it's a very livable house.
And it's home to the atomic clock, the most precise timescale in the world, which should help Mr. Pence stay on schedule.
All right, so that's the house. It's right down the street from the White House. It's probably like a mile, and it's on like they said, it's the Naval Observatory. That's comparable to when I went to London to Greenwich, which is where their Royal Observatory was. It's Greenwich time. You might have heard of that before. It's where the prime meridian goes through and stuff. But that's our equivalent to that. And that's where the vice president lives in that Victorian. Pretty nice. But the vice president is a chief advisor and a helper to the presidents now, which I like. I think the founding fathers would have been happy with that, especially since they're not such a big role in the Senate like they used to be, or they were originally supposed to be. The cabinet, we talked about this a little bit when we did the tour and stuff, but the cabinet room and stuff. This is the cabinet room. And it's cool how they sit in order of how the position was created, and it goes around the table. And the vice president is across from the president. So these are all the heads of the executive departments. They are, and they run like he's the head of housing and urban development. Secretary of Treasury. I mean, they represent an entire department with thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that work in them. They have an office in the West Wing, and they also have an office in another building, like the Secretary of Defense. Secretary of Defense has an office in the West Wing, and he also has an office back at the Pentagon. And all the people there are running like the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Education. Betsy DeVos is right here. It's the back of her head. They run all those huge departments. And the cabinet meeting's idea is that is just to kind of talk about government, where they're going and stuff. The cabinet meetings aren't really probably as good a time for Donald Trump to make decisions as when he meets in smaller groups with the Secretary of the Treasury and stuff like that, and housing and urban development. They make decisions on what they're going to do with money and stuff, and taxes and all that stuff, and what they should pose for legislation. And again, they all present him. Their job is to do their homework and then go to him and present to him, and then he makes the decision. It's almost like these things where I do the research and what I want to teach you, and I go through. Then I come in and I teach you for 20 minutes, and then you make a decision to do really well on the quiz. But that's what they do. They come in with this presentation, and then he decides. That's why I think the Decider is a great name. I'll get off that. Departments are weird. It's parts of the government that aren't to the level of executive that have cabinet leaders. So there's a bunch of them. Digital strategy. Sometimes presidents will pull some of these and put them on the cabinet. And different presidents will bring in a couple of extra of these. But these are just like presidential correspondence, different parts of the job that have huge staff that report to the president and advise him too. And the last one is the agencies. And the agencies are more of, they work for the government, but they tend to be like outside of the president's kind of thumb, like the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, the National Archives, the Art, the Commission on Civil Rights, how they kind of keep an eye on the government. And so all these agencies are part of the executive branch, but they're not as they wouldn't meet with the president that way. Matter of fact, very rarely do you see the CIA chief meeting with the president. It doesn't happen that much unless there's something going on. Right. So that's all right. So those are all the parts of the government that help him do his job, which is, that's important. Right. Next. So this is the job, it says in the Constitution their job is basically to carry out the laws. That's their main job. They execute the laws. We talked about that all year long. That's their main job. Legislative branch make the law. The executive branch carry out the law. The judiciary branch interprets the law. But they also have these other things. Head of state is the ceremonial role. And I'm doing this on the day after Memorial Day, and President Trump went to Arlington National Cemetery to lay a wreath on behalf of us. He represents all of us when he does that. He's saying, thank you to the Army and the military. And then he went to Fort McHenry, and he gave a speech about the people who are suffering from COVID-19 and how the nation is behind them. And again, that's a ceremonial role. It's just representing us. And this is him giving an award. It's kind of cool. The Medal of Honor, which is like the highest military award that you can get. And I wish it would work. It will. It's just a little slow. This is Army Times. This is their official. Really? What is this? I don't know why it's doing that. Well, maybe you won't see it. But it showed him giving the Medal of Honor to an Iraq veteran, and it was it's just that's it. I mean, he's doing that on our behalf. That's like a power that the Queen kind of kept in England. That's one of the only powers that the Queen kept in England. She gave up all her power as far as politics go and all that. But she does that ceremonial thing. This ceremonial thing. She does that guy who was the old veteran who walked around his house and raised like $40 million to help fight COVID-19. He's 100 years old. She's going to knight him. And that's kind of the equivalent of being knighted in our country, is the Medal of Honor. But and when she does that, she represents all of England thanking someone. And at that moment, he's representing all of America saying thank you. He's not representing the Republican Party. He's not representing the Democrats. He's representing America saying thank you for being who you are and doing what you did. All right, so that's the head of state thing. The chief executive is like the boss. It's the guy, the decider. That's what I just said. It's the guy who, all the executive departments, they all run the government. All these guys are really running sections of the government, and he's making decisions, and he's influencing them to run in a certain way. Some presidents are more delegators, and they allow them to kind of run their own show. Ronald Reagan was kind of like that. and some are more hands-on and push their agenda more and control everything. Um, and it's different styles, and different styles work for different people. I think that's one of the powers of Donald Trump coming into office, was that he was running a huge corporation, and he had that experience where a lot of presidents don't have that experience. It's more political. Chief diplomat, that's foreign relations, and this is a small picture, but it's going overseas and meeting with foreign leaders. Here's the Prime Minister of Canada, Prime Minister of Germany, Italy, France, Japan, and Great Britain. It's not her anymore. She's left, and now it's Boris Johnson. But he represents our face to the rest of the world, and it's our foreign relations. The Commander in Chief of the Armed Services. Remember, they wanted the military to be kept in civilian hands. That's a brilliant move by the founding fathers. And so in a lot of countries, even great democracies throughout the world, this isn't the way they do it. And when these guys, who are the heads, this is the head of the branches of the military. They are the top guys. They're the Joint Chiefs. They have an office in the West Wing. They are not political. If you watch them during the State of the Union, they don't applaud. They just sit there just like that and kind of give you the death stare. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or Democrat. They're not political. They're advisors on military stuff. They know the military better than anyone else. And the fact that they have to listen to a civilian that's elected by the people is important in a democracy. And it's a good thing, I think. Oops, keep on hitting the wrong buttons. The chief legislator. I mean, that's not really the legislative. The person who makes laws is really not the president, but the president has the attention. Whenever the president gives a press conference, it's covered. Whenever the president gives a speech, if he flies into Boston, he'll be on the nightly news in Boston. I mean, he gets so much attention, and our fourth estate, the media, pays so much attention to the president, no matter who he is or she is, that they are able to push an agenda. This is a State of the Union address. You can see some of the Supreme Court justices there in the front. His cabinet is over here. And again, what they do is they have like the senators and the congressmen in the room at the same time, except for one person from the cabinet is up on Air Force One flying around in case something horrible should happen. They have to restart the government. Good. So they do. They because they have the bully pulpit, because they have that, because they have the attention of the media, they can push through legislation more than just any normal congressman or senator. They get more attention than any, for sure. Good. And then the last part is they run the political party. In the news today was that Donald Trump is worried about the Republican National Convention and whether they're going to be able to have a convention. It's going to be in August, and that's where the president formally gets nominated by the Republican Party to run for re-election. And then the election campaign goes from August, September, October, and the election's in November. He wants to have the convention, and he kind of runs the party. Whoever the president is, they become the head of that political party. And so that's also a thing. And, the guy who's the head of the Democratic Party now, I don't even know his name. They elect somebody and to run the party. And it's not that important. But whoever the president, when Barack Obama was president, he was the head of the Democratic Party, basically. Right? So that's really it. I mean, so that's what I'm saying to you. That's what I kind of want you to get out of this, that the president's main power is to carry out laws, but like they're the head of state. They give out awards. They represent the nation. They lay wreaths. They're the chief executive. They're the decider. The decider in chief. They represent us in foreign relations. They set the agenda. And Donald Trump's agenda with foreign relations has been America first, and that's very different from what Obama was. Obama was a world economy and relationships. So you got to consider that when you're electing a president. the commander-in-chief. This is the brilliance of the Constitution, one of the brilliant things in the Constitution, because there's countries that don't have this, and Pakistan comes to mind, where they have a prime minister, but their military is separate. And sometimes when the military is separate like that, the military will overthrow or threaten to overthrow the government, and it causes problems. Chief legislature, only because he can put pressure on pushing legislation, and he gets people talking about things. If I said, I think, we should invest more on infrastructure, and we should build better Wi-Fi across the country, and it should be free access to everyone, no one's going to hear that but you guys just on this video. I mean, I'm an 8th grade middle school teacher. If Donald Trump started talking about it, everyone would start talking about it. There'd be reports on it, on the evening news and stuff. So that's what I mean by that. And then the head of the political party. That's all for today. Next is one of my favorites to do with you guys. It's the day in the life of the president, and it kind of goes through what their day looks like, and it's chaotic and it's hard. It's probably the hardest job in the world. So that is it, and I don't have my Game of Thrones queued again. I keep forgetting. I'm old. There it is. All right, guys. Have a fun educational afternoon. Go get an all back. Wash your hands. Don't touch your face. Wear a mask in public if you have to be in public. And be safe and have fun. It's getting warm out.